Evening, everybody. It is 5:30, so we will get started because we have a lot of content to cover tonight. So again, thank you for joining us and taking time out of your lovely evening. As always, just a few housekeeping items and reminders to go over first. Please keep your microphone on mute until the Q&A portions of the webinar. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please type them in the chat and we'll answer them. To find the chat feature in your Zoom window, look for the speaking bubble icon or the chat button. The chat does default to all webinar participants or everyone in the to field. To send a direct message to one individual, click the down arrow after everyone and then select that participant. Next, if you need or want captions, you can enable these by finding the CC or Show Captions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you do not see the CC button, look for the More button with the 3 dots. Click on that button to enable captions. So welcome to tonight's webinar, Making Jams, Jellies, and Other Spreads. This is the first food preservation topic in the Food Safety Foundation's series. During the January, February, and March webinars, we set the stage for safe food preservation by talking about pathogens that can contaminate food and cause foodborne illness, what pathogens need to grow, and how your actions can impact this growth. And then the best practices for a thorough sanitation routine. In April, we reviewed a variety of equipment needed for different food preservation methods with an emphasis on how these contribute to the safety of your value-added and preserved foods. So beginning with this webinar, we'll start to apply all of this information to different food preservation methods each month. In case you were unable to join us for one of the previous webinars, Lauren is sharing a link to the playlist on our YouTube channel in the chat. So I am Amy Johnston, and I am tonight's speaker. I'm a regional extension educator with the University of Minnesota on our food systems team, specifically working in the area of food safety. And also with us tonight is Lauren Backus, who's here to assist with any technical difficulties. You can direct message Lauren in the Zoom chat if you're experiencing any problems, and she'll also be sharing links and information in the chat throughout the webinar. So let's dive in. So we have a full agenda today, so I won't be pausing for questions until the end. So tonight we're going to start by defining the different sweet fruit spreads. Then we'll discuss the key components, roles in food preservation and food safety. We'll watch a few short videos that will demonstrate different steps in the canning process. And lastly, we'll talk about safe recipes, some recipe development and testing. So whether you're joining us to benefit your food business or you just want to learn more, I hope you leave this webinar with increased confidence in your ability to prevent foodborne illness. At the end of this webinar, you'll be able to identify safe recipes and procedures for making jams, jellies, and other fruit spreads, be able to safely make a sweet fruit spread by correctly using those key components and processes, and be able to engage with and inform your customers about the safety of your products. And then lastly, know how to access resources after this webinar. So a sweet fruit spread is a product that is jellied or thickened with either the addition of pectin or reducing the fruit mixture by boiling to remove water. And then sugar is added to sweeten and preserve the fruit. The fruit spreads we will discuss tonight are jellies, jams, preserves, conserves, and marmalades. So a jelly or a fruit jelly, I should say, is a semi-solid mixture of fruit juice and sugar that's clear and firm enough to hold its own shape when it's out of the jar. By weight, a jelly is at least 55% sugar. And jelly does not have any pieces of fruit in the mixture. A fruit jam is less firm than a jelly, and it's made from crushed or chopped fruits and sugar. A preserve is a type of fruit spread that's made with either small whole fruits like berries or uniform size pieces of larger pieces of fruit in a clear, thick, slightly jellied syrup. A conserve is a type of jam that will include a mixture of fruits and either citrus, nuts, raisins, coconut, or some other spices. And then a marmalade is a soft fruit jelly with very small pieces of fruit or citrus peel evenly suspended in that clear jelly. So just a note, we are not going to be discussing fruit butters, fruit honeys, or fruit syrups because those are not jellied products. So in general, a sweet fruit spread is made of 4 components, but the source and the quantities will vary depending on the type of fruit spread. The components are a fruit or a combination of different fruits. Pectin, that's either naturally present in the fruit or added. An acid, again, either naturally present in the fruit or added, and sugar. Each of these components plays an important role in the quality and safety of the final fruit spread. So first up is fruit. Not only is the fruit the food that we're preserving, but it also provides the flavor and aroma. It's a water source to dissolve the other components. It can be a source of pectin and it can be a source of acid. The amount of pectin and the amount of acid naturally present in the fruit varies on the type of fruit and its ripeness. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Pectin is a type of carbohydrate, specifically a polysaccharide, which means it has many starch molecules. Polysaccharides help give structure to cell walls. So that's important in that forming of a gel in a sweet fruit spread. In sweet fruit spreads, when those pectin molecules bind with other pectin molecules, it creates that mesh or web-like structure that we need. Acid. So in order for pectin molecules to bind with each other, they need to be exposed to an acid or activated by an acid. The acid changes the structure of the pectin and its ability to bind with other molecules. So without an acid, the pectin molecules would tend to want to bind with water molecules instead of binding with other pectin molecules. And then we would not get that web or that mesh-like structure. So too little acid present in a gel will not form because the pectin molecules won't want to bind with each other, and too much acid present and the gel can be really, really strong that it'll start to lose liquid or weak. And then lastly is sugar. So sugar is an important component in fruit spreads because it acts as a preserving agent by reducing the water activity. And when the sugar molecules absorb the water molecules, this increases the pectin's ability to bind with other pectin molecules and again, create that mesh or web-like structure. The reduced water activity is important for food safety as this decreases the amount of free water molecules available for any potential pathogens or molds to use for growth and survival. So for the most flavorful product, use ripe fruit that's in season. Avoid using pieces that are damaged with cracks or holes or have severe bruising, as these can be entry points for pathogens and lead to contamination. Thoroughly wash your fruit before using. Lauren is sharing a link in the chat about washing produce. And using fruit at room temperature will begin to release its juice faster and dissolve sugar faster. So it can speed up the process. The fruit selected for the preserved fruit spread will have an impact on the addition of that acidic and pectin components. So combining fruits from different stages of ripeness and different types of fruits can help provide that right balance of components and achieve a desirable flavor. So pectin is found in all fruits, but some contain more than others. On the screen is a table that categorizes fruits by the amount of naturally occurring pectin. These are fruits that are rich in pectin. The middle column is fruits that might need added pectin. And then the last column is fruits that are low in natural pectin. Fruits that are naturally high or rich in pectin work well in recipes without an added commercial pectin. So using the long boil method. There are many fruits that may need to be combined with high pectin fruits or having that commercial pectin added because their content, their natural pectin content can vary, and that's that middle column again. And then again, there's those fruits that are really low in pectin and that would need to have a commercial pectin added to them. Additionally, the ripeness of the fruit impacts how much natural pectin is present. Fully ripened fruits have less pectin than slightly underripe fruit. And this is because as the fruit ripens, the pectin breaks down into pectic acid. So when making a sweet fruit spread, it's recommended to use 1/4 of the quantity of fruit as slightly underripe and the remaining as ripe. You want to avoid using overripe because there's not going to be much, if any, pectin there, and so it's not going to help with that gel formation. So you can test for the amount of pectin that is present in a fruit. There's two methods. The first method is to extract juice from the fruit and cool that juice. Then combine 1 teaspoon of that juice with 1 tablespoon of denatured or rubbing alcohol. Stir it slightly and let it stand for about 2 minutes. Juice that is rich in natural pectin is going to form one solid jelly-like mass. And juice that is low in natural pectin is going to form these little particles, not one large mass. So don't taste that mixture after you make it. So if the juice that you've extracted is low in pectin, it's going to make those little particles, and you'll want to add a commercial pectin to the jam or the jellies that you're making. The other method is the cooking test. So again, you're going to extract juice. You want 1/3 of a cup of extracted juice from your fruit, and you're going to combine that with 1/4 cup of sugar. And then you'll heat that slowly in a saucepan, stirring until the sugar is dissolved. Then you'll bring that mixture up to a boil, let it boil rapidly, and you'll be using the sheeting test, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And once that mixture is forming a sheet, pour it into a clean bowl and let it cool. And if the texture is jelly-like, that fruit has enough pectin and you don't need to add a commercial pectin. If it doesn't form that jelly-like structure, you'll want to add a pectin. So making a preserved fruit spread using pectin that is naturally present in the fruit, again, will require the use of that long boil method. And the long boil method is an extended cooking time to cook off or evaporate enough water to achieve the gel texture and water activity that we need for safety. And then just a note, commercially frozen fruits and frozen fruit juices are low in natural pectin because of ripeness of the fruit that commercial manufacturers are using. So if you're going to use a commercially frozen fruit or frozen fruit juice, you're very much likely going to need to use a commercial pectin with that. There are commercially prepared pectins that come in powdered and liquid form. These commercial pectins have traditionally been made from citrus peels and apple pomace, which would be the core, peels, and seeds. They're now also being made from sunflower heads, sugar beet roots, pumpkin, and tropical fruit pomace. So I thought that was interesting. A powdered pectin is added to the uncooked fruit and then heated. A liquid pectin is added to the cooked fruit and then heated again. So the order of adding ingredients is important to ensure the gel is formed correctly so a safe product is made. Liquid commercial pectins may contain sulfites, which is a food additive. And I mention it because some people might be sensitive to sulfites and could have an allergic reaction. So just something to be aware of. Pectin is also available in regular, also referred to as traditional or classic, and modified. So a modified pectin might be referred to as a low, a less, or a no added sugar. Modified pectins are commercial pectins that can be used to prepare the preserved fruit spreads with less or no added sugar. There are two types of modified pectins available for home use. One formulation adds preservatives to the pectin to prevent spoilage, and it can be used in recipes to reduce the amount of sugar by 1/3. The other formulation is a low methoxyl pectin, which requires a source of calcium instead of acidity to form that gel. So a calcium ingredient is added to the product by the manufacturer. So it's not something that you have to add separately. And both of these products might be labeled as light, less sugar, or no added sugar. Regular pectin should not be substituted for modified pectin and vice versa, as the amount of the other ingredients might differ slightly. Similarly, a powdered pectin should not be substituted for a liquid pectin, as the procedure and the quantities are different. For all commercial pectins, check the best by or the best if used by date, as old pectin can lose its effectiveness, resulting in a weak gel formation. So to extend the shelf life of powdered pectins, you can store them in a non-permeable or airtight container in the freezer. And then lastly, just a couple quick notes. Modified food starch and gelatin are not the same as pectin and should not be used in place of pectin in recipes. Gelatin will create a gel when added to a fruit juice mixture. However, gelatin cannot be processed like pectin in the canning and that heat processing. So a gelatin cannot have that shelf-stable product like we would get using a pectin. So fruit spreads made with gelatin must be stored in the refrigerator. So in general, or as a starting point, if you are developing your own recipe to be sent to a lab for testing, to make a jam using a regular powdered pectin, you would want to start with 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of pectin per 1 cup of prepared fruit. And if you're going to make a jelly, 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of pectin for 1 cup of extracted fruit juice. If you're using a regular liquid pectin, for a jam, it would be 1 1/4 tablespoon pectin per 1 cup prepared fruit. And for a jelly, 1 tablespoon pectin per 1 cup of extracted fruit juice. Again, these are general guidelines to be used as a starting point for recipe development. The final recipe and that product should be tested in a lab to ensure the food safety criteria are met. Let's just do a quick refresher on acidity from the February webinar. So just a reminder that pH is the measurement of acidity of a food. The pH scale is from 0, the most acidic, to 14, the least acidic or alkaline or basic. Acidic or acidified foods have a pH of 4.6 or less, and low acid foods have that pH of greater than 4.6. That 4.6 number is important because that is what's been shown to prevent the growth of pathogens. So our jams, our jellies, our fruit spreads, those are all having that pH of 4.6 or less. So as I mentioned during the beginning, an acid is needed to activate the pectin molecules so that that gel can be formed. Too little acidity and a gel will not form. Too much acidity and the gel will be too strong and will start to lose liquid or weep. So on the screen is a table that categorizes fruits based on their acidity. The first column is fruits that have a pH of 3.5 or less. The middle column are fruits that have a pH of greater than 3.5. And then the last column are variable pH. And it's going to be dependent on the type or the variety, how it was grown. And we're looking at that pH of 3.5 because the pH of the prepared fruit or the extracted fruit juice should be between 3 and 3.5 in order to activate those pectin molecules. So if the fruit is in that range, no acid, like a lemon juice, needs to be added. And if it's above that, then an acidic ingredient like lemon juice, or combining it with fruits that have a lower pH needs to happen. So that first column of the pH less than 3.5, you wouldn't need to add an acid ingredient to your recipe. That middle column, the pH greater than 3.5, you would want to add like a lemon juice, or you'll want to combine it with the, fruits from that first column. And then the variable pH, you can either add an acid ingredient or you can test the pH of that fruit. Excuse me. So when an acid needs to be added, again, I said you can add like a lemon juice. So the pH of lemon juice is usually between 2 and 2.6. Or if you were to use lime juice, that's between 2 and 2.35. So both of those are well below that 3.5. You could use bottled lemon juice, which is going to have a consistent pH, or you could use a fresh lemon or lime juice, and because the taste might be preferable in a fresh versus the bottled. You could also add citric or ascorbic acid powder instead of one of those juices. Commercial pectin products might also already have that acid ingredient, such as fumaric acid already added to them. So taste can be a really helpful indicator when you are trying to determine that pH of your fruit, if you are developing that recipe. So if the tartness of the fruit is comparable to a mixture of 3 tablespoons of water, plus 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, plus a half teaspoon of sugar, that fruit likely has enough acidity. So again, that's if the taste of that fruit is comparable to 3 tablespoons of water, plus 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, plus a half teaspoon of sugar, the acidity is likely where you need it to be. However, if it's not comparable, if that fruit is sweeter, then that mixture, you can start by adding between 2 teaspoons and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, or an eighth of a teaspoon of citric acid per 1 cup of prepared fruit or fruit juice. So again, this is really helpful when you're developing your recipe before you do testing to ensure that you're getting the taste that you want, and also meeting those safety standards. So to then really confirm your final product, if you have that pH meter, you can also measure the pH of that fruit juice. So you'd extract your juice, and then be looking for a pH of 3.5 or less. Let's just do a quick refresher on water activity. So water activity is that ability of free water molecules to bind with other water molecules. The water activity scale goes from 0 to 1. Foods with a water activity closer to 1 have a high water activity. So it's easy for molecules to bind with water. So pathogens have easy access to water. Foods that have a water activity of 0.85 or below are shown to make it difficult for pathogens and to bind with water. So that increases their food safety. So we're looking to have that final jam, jelly, fruit spread with a water activity less than 0.85. So sugar plays an important role in making sweet fruit spreads. Without the correct use of sugar, the water activity of the fruit spread may not be low enough to help prevent the growth of pathogens. So when prepared correctly, sweet fruit spreads will have a water activity, usually between 0.8 and 0.84. Sugar also plays a role in delaying the oxidation of the fruit or slowing down any color changes. So in general, at least 1/2 of sugar for each 1 cup of fruit or fruit juice is needed to make a stable and sweet product. Granulated sugar, so cane or sugar beets, are the usual sugar source in the ingredients. Confectioners or powdered sugar should not be substituted for granulated sugar because their weights and volumes are different, and cornstarch can be added to confectioner sugar to prevent clumping. Corn syrup and honey can be used to replace part of the sugar when making fruit spreads. Because these sugar sources naturally contain some water, they can impact that final water activity of the spread, which is why you just can't substitute all of the sugar for all honey. Brown sugar, sorghum, molasses, they're not really recommended as their sweetness can mask the flavor and then also cause some color changes in that final product. And then artificial sweeteners cannot simply be substituted for regular granulated sugar because they're not going to aid in that gel formation in the same way. So if you're looking for those lower sugar options, you need to use the low, less, or no sugar commercial pectin options for those shelf-stable products. Use tested recipes with reduced sugar or non-caloric sweetener ingredients, or you can use some tested recipes that have a concentrated fruit pulp as a component. Many reduced sugar recipes will require refrigeration because they're made with a sugar substitute that's not heat stable, so it can't be canned and processed. Also, the water activity might not be low enough, and which again also makes it not shelf stable. Or it was made with a gelatin powder. So those kind of recipes are going to say things like no cook, refrigerator, or freezer jam in the description. So I mentioned not substituting one pectin for another pectin because the quantities of other ingredients may differ. So here's a comparison for a cooked reduced sugar and a regular sugar jam made with powdered pectin. So you can see the difference in the ingredient quantities. There's slightly less fruit used in the regular. significantly more sugar used in the regular, but then also sugar is added a little bit differently in the less or the no sugar. We're combining a small portion with the pectin before the majority is added. So when correctly prepared, our preserved fruit spreads are non-potentially hazardous foods that can be stored in a cool, dry place until opened. Once opened, they do need to be stored in refrigeration. So along with safe food handling practices, these products are made safe by controlling the water activity and the pH and using that heating and processing in canning. The heat processing kills many pathogens that could be present on the fruit, as we discussed in the January webinar. So that could include something like E. coli. Controlling the water activity and the pH inhibits or prevents the toxin formation of pathogens like Clostridium botulinum. So like I mentioned, the water activity of a sweet fruit spread will be between 0.8 and 0.84, which is below that 0.85. And the pH of fruit jams usually ranges between 3.5 and 4.5, and jellies 3 to 3.5. And both of those are below that 4.6 pH. So again, making them safe. Mold, especially molds that produce mycotoxins, can be a concern in sweet fruit spreads if the product was not prepared correctly or the jar did not seal properly during processing. If contaminated, molds may be visible on the top of the spread, or you might see moving bubbles throughout the jar. And that's evidence of cellular respiration. So don't consume or sell these products, and don't just simply scrape the mold off the top and reprocess, as the mold can move throughout the remainder of the food. At one point, it was recommended to use paraffin or wax on a jar. However, we know now with research that wax shrinks over time and starts to get pinholes. So that creates some entry points for bacteria or mold spores to get into that jar. And if that food was to then become contaminated, they have access to that sugary food source. And then similarly, inverting jars is no longer a practice or no longer recommended practice, because that's not going to get that airtight or that hermetic seal that we're looking for. So now let's get into the making and processing of the fruit spread. So before you begin, make sure you know all of the equipment and the supplies you will need. The equipment and supplies are going to vary depending on the type of fruit spread you are preparing. So if you're making a jelly, you're going to want to have the jelly bag and the cheesecloth. We reviewed many of these during the April webinar, getting ready to preserve. Before making a sweet fruit spread, take time to understand the type and the recipe you are going to use. Are you going to be adding a commercial pectin or not? Are you going to be processing it so it's shelf stable? Where did you get your recipe? There are 3 methods to preserve sweet fruit spreads. The method of canning and processing is likely why you joined today, as this produces that shelf-stable product. Like we've briefly mentioned, there's also methods for refrigerator jams and freezer jams, both cooked or no cook. But we're not going to really spend time on those today. So for canning and processing sweet fruit spreads, because that pH is low, like we said, it's below that 4.6, either by using fruits with a low pH or adding that acidic ingredient, a boiling water bath or an atmospheric steam canner can be used. A pressure canner is not needed. Processing these foods in a boiling water bath or an atmospheric steam canner is important to killing or inactivating any of pathogens that could be present, and it creates that hermetic or that airtight seal on the jar. Another thing to know before you get started is to know your elevation. So preserved fruit spreads are usually in half pint or quarter pint jars. So before starting to prepare your fruit again, or your spread, know your elevation. That elevation has an impact on the boiling point of water. So that will impact how long your jar needs to be processed, and then also for sterilizing jars. A safe recipe will include instructions that kind of match what you see on the screen. So 5 minutes of processing time at an elevation of 0 to 1,000 feet, with adding an additional minute for every 1,000 feet gained. So the vast majority of Minnesota is around 1,200 feet, which puts us in that 6-minute processing time. Some other higher elevation areas are in Southwest Minnesota, like in Lincoln, Pipestone, Rock, Murray, Nobles, Jackson, and Cottonwood counties, and then also up in Cook County by Eagle Mountain. We have a very high point. So know your elevation. Recipes will indicate that you do not need to sterilize your jars before filling with the sweet fruit spread. And that is correct. The temperature reached during processing would kill any pathogens of concern. However, the processing time needs to be increased. So if we go back, so if we are using a sterilized jar, we're going to process for 6 minutes. If we're not using a sterilized jar, we need to add another 5 minutes when we're processing. Pectin can be sensitive to heat, so you may choose to sterilize your jars first, just to use that lesser processing time. So to sterilize your jars, you're going to use a large pot. You'll put a perforated rack in the bottom. Again, we know that that's really important to make sure that water is able to circulate around all the sides of the jars, so we don't get any cold spots. And then you're going to fill all of the jars with water, and then surrounding all of the jars with water, and then with enough water to be about 1 to 2 inches above the top of the jars. And that's, again, just making sure that there's going to be that hot water contacting all sides of the jar. And then you'll bring the large pot to a burner. You'll bring that to a boil. You'll let that water boil for 10 minutes, adding 1 minute for every foot, or 1 minute for every 1,000 feet above that sea level. So we would be boiling for 11 minutes in the majority of Minnesota to sterilize jars. So she's going to add a little bit more water. Now we're good. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about jellies, and then we'll transition to jams. So first up with jellies, we have that extra step of extracting the juice from the fruit. And we extract that juice by heating the fruit. And that juice that comes out from that fruit is going to contain that pectin and acid. So to extract juice, you're going to add cold water to your washed, cleaned fruit. So for small fruits like berries and grapes that have a thin skin and contain a lot of water, you're just going to add enough cold water to prevent that fruit and juice from scorching or burning as you heat it. For apples or other hard fruits, use about 1 cup of cold water per 1 pound of cleaned fruit, and that will yield about 1 cup of fruit juice once it's been cooked and strained. You can add like the peels and the cores into that mixture that you're heating because that's going to contain even more pectin, and you're going to strain it out at the end. In the pan, crush the fruit, and that's going to help to start to release those juices. Bring to a boil on high heat, stirring to prevent scorching and burning. And once that mixture has come to a boil, reduce the heat and let it cook until the fruit is really soft and that juice is seeping from the fruit. So for some fruits like grapes or berries, that might take 10 minutes or less. Apples or other hard fruits could take between 20 to 25 minutes. Could take longer if your fruit is cold, depending on the size of your pieces of fruit. So there are a few different variables. Then you'll collect your juice. You'll first strain it through a colander to remove any large pieces. And then you'll strain it again, either through a jelly bag or through a double layer of cheesecloth to make sure you're getting any fine particles out. You can either cook with pectin or without pectin. When we are cooking our jelly, we want to, for in Minnesota, we're going to be between that 216 to 218 degrees. That's going to be kind of our jellying point. You can be testing that using a candy or a jelly thermometer and monitor it that way. And then you can also use the cold spoon test. You'll dip a clean metal spoon into the fruit mixture as it is cooking, raise that above the steam line. If it is falling off the spoon in lots of little drops, it's not ready, it's a syrup. If it's making a couple drops that are starting to come together, you're getting close. And when that mixture is falling off the spoon in that sheet, then you know you have reached the jellying step. Okay. And then you'll fill your jars and you'll process it how we will process the jams in the upcoming videos. So now let's talk about jams. So earlier this year, I had the opportunity to work with two very talented master gardener food preservation consultants to film a variety of food preservation methods. So the videos over the next several minutes are from this project and from their efforts. So very grateful for that. The recipe we used in these videos is for a reduced sugar strawberry jam, and we used a modified powdered pectin. So first we are preparing the fruit. So after washing the fruit, removing any caps, stems, pits, seeds, any of those other kind of physical hazards, again, a physical hazard could be anything that's not expected to be there. We're cutting it into uniform pieces, and that's going to help to ensure that it heats evenly and quickly. And then you would do that same kind of cutting for all your fruits, except maybe very small berries. Next, we mashed the fruit in a pot. Mashing the fruit helps to get that juice flowing. It's easier with room temperature fruit. Getting those juices flowing is really important because remember, in that juice is where there's that pectin and that acid. Um, if you need to, you can mash the fruit in batches just to ensure that even consistency. When a recipe calls for 6 cups prepared fruit, that means the mashed fruit, not the whole fruit or just the cut fruit. So to ensure that we had the correct proportions, we measured the quantity that we needed. Any excess fruit could be put in the refrigerator and used in a second batch or used in other recipes. You can also freeze the excess fruit because at this point, no sugar or pectin has been added to it. Then you can thaw it and use it to make jam in the future. If you're going to do that, I recommend weighing it or measuring it and then writing that on the package just so you remember how much you have. Then remember that if using a commercial pectin, powdered and liquid pectins are added at different times. In this example, we were using that powdered modified pectin. So this less sugar added option required us to add the pectin to a small quantity of the sugar, I believe a 1/4 cup of the sugar. So right now she's thoroughly mixing the pectin and the sugar together to make sure it's evenly dispersed and then combining it with the mashed strawberries. So stirring it really well, again, making sure it's all evenly distributed and dissolved because that's going to help ensure for that consistent product. So now the fruit pectin mixture can be cooked or heated. The amount of time may vary depending on the type of burner. So if you're using gas or electric, the type of pot, if the fruit was cold or not. And again, because we're using a modified powdered pectin, once the mixture has come to a boil for 1 minute, that's when we'll add the remaining amount of sugar, stirring constantly to mix in the sugar and prevent scorching. It's then returned to a boil until the consistency is reached. And we want to make sure we get that right consistency, again, because that impacts the gel formation and the water activity of the spread. So now she's just removing it from the heat, letting it sit and set a little bit. You can remove any of the foam at this time if you want. The foam is just sugar molecules and air. It's not harmful to the final product if you choose to leave it in there. It's just maybe not as visually as appealing. Um, so we didn't have the consistency we wanted, and now we're heating it again, and now we're going to test. Dip the spoon in, and if you draw the line, nothing runs, or you can use the cold plate, and if it makes that jelly structure on the cold plate, we know that we've reached our consistency. So once that consistency is reached, it's time to fill the jars. So remove from heat. Again, if there's any foam that you want to remove, you can at this time. Sometimes letting the jam sit for about 5 or so minutes after removing it from the heat will prevent any floating fruit in your jars because it just allows kind of everything to come to equilibrium or stabilize throughout the mixture. So now she's filling her jars and she's checking for that head space. For the jam, we're looking for a 1/4 inch head space, and she's using the fancy tool to check that. Then she's wiping the rim clean so we don't have any little spills or splatters that'll interfere with the sealing once those jars get processed. You'll put on the band to keep the lid in place, and you're securing it to just fingertip tight. You don't have to really crank it on there. And then in this example, we used an atmospheric steam canner to process the jars. So we have hot water in the bottom of our steam canner. You can see it's right below the tray. It's not above the tray. We are evenly spacing the jars in the canner, again, to allow steam to hit all sides for that even heating and processing. And then we're putting the lid on, turning down the heat. And when we hear and we see that jet of steam coming out of the side, that's when we know that we can start the timer for processing. So just a few notes before we talk about checking the seal of the jars. Um, uh, Just remember that, so a conserve is that type of jam that includes a mixture of fruits and either citrus, nuts, raisins, coconuts, or some other spices. Just as with regular jams, depending on the type of fruit used, and you might need to add pectin and or an acid to get that right and safe consistency. Be mindful of the cooking temperature, as some need to be cooked to just that gelling point. So again, between that 216 and 218 degrees Fahrenheit for Minnesota, and others need to be above this or only to boiling, about 212. And then the jars are filled and processed just like we did with the jams. So a preserve, just a reminder, is a type of fruit spread that's made with small whole fruits like berries or uniform sized pieces of larger fruits in that clear, thick, slightly jellied syrup. When making preserves, a very large amount of sugar is added, and sometimes water may be necessary because we're trying to get that syrup around the fruit. And then marmalades are that soft fruit jelly with the small pieces of fruit or citrus peel evenly suspended in that clear jelly. When making marmalades, pectin and acid may need to be added, again, depending on the type of the fruit. It's important to include some part of the white part of the rind or the pith because this contains pectin, so that'll help the consistency. And then additionally, water might be added. Marmalades are usually cooked to 9 degrees above the boiling point of water, so very similar to jelly, but could be 1 degree higher. So using a candy or jelly thermometer for making a marmalade is really helpful. So regardless of what we made, a jam, jelly, preserve, conserve, or marmalade, after processing, we want to check this seal. So we've let our jars sit. You'll start to hear some of that loud clicking.
Two.
So those are sealed. This is unsealed. So if you take your jar out and if it's cooled and you have not heard that loud click or pop, and you push down on the lid and you're getting that popping, that means your jar has not sealed. If it has not sealed, you can either put it in the refrigerator and keep it in there, and it's just not going to be shelf stable, or you can reprocess it. Okay. So like we've said, there are recipes, tips, tricks, hacks everywhere when you're researching food preservation methods. So how do you know which recipes or methods are safe? In the past, we've talked about the USDA, the National Center for Home Food Preservation, using state extension services that are partners with the USDA. Lauren is going to share a link in the chat to a nice publication from North Dakota State University Extension that developed an excellent resource for making jams and jellies with wild or native fruits. And then there's the ball additions, and using the ball pectin calculator is also a really good tool as well to come up with your recipes. All of these recipes will have directions for the processing time based on your elevation requirements, the equipment required for the canning, and the details about using the water bath or the steam canner. In April, we talked about methods that are not safe to use for canning. And then while there are a lot of research-based test recipes available, when you have that family recipe that's been passed down from generation, or you want to create your own, first, you can always start with just following the safe substitution guidelines. And Lauren is sharing a link to that article in the chat. You can always add 1 teaspoon or less or herbs or other flavorings, like adding basil or lavender to a strawberry jam. Or however, if you are wanting to get very creative and develop your own recipe, you can use the principles that we've discussed today, and then have that recipe and that food product tested in a lab. And that food lab is going to review your recipe and test for that water activity and that pH. And then just before we open it up for questions, just a few troubleshooting resources I want to share with you. The National Center for Home Food Preservation has an entire section dedicated to the potential causes and solutions for problems in jellied fruit products. Lauren's going to share a link in the chat to that. I'll also include all of these in the follow-up email as well. And then the North Central Food Safety Extension Network has a nice resource, remaking jams and jellies. We'll talk about reprocessing that. And then there's always the answer line, who is a great resource as well for questions. So that is everything I wanted to cover tonight. Thank you all for attending. As always, would love to hear feedback on today's webinar. The evaluation survey should just take a few minutes. Again, your responses are anonymous and they help to guide future programs. You can scan the QR code, or Lauren is putting the link in the chat. And then reminder, next month we'll be talking about pickling produce. It is again offered at 2 different times, same content. You can follow the link or scan the QR code. And with that, I will stop and open it up for questions.